Salve!
Salve, Carla.
Salve!
And
Salve,
hello.
Luki.
Salve, Assis. And hello to everyone out there, and welcome to another polýMATHY podcast. And we're joined today with the amazing, the wonderful, and extremely talented Carla Hurt, whose channel, found in Antiquity, everyone should subscribe to immediately. In fact, if that's all you do by watching this live stream today, then I will be personally very, very happy. So, Carla, welcome, and thanks so much for being with all of us. And this is for our American audience, this might be a particular hour. Of course, I'm in Rome, you're in Australia, so even scheduling this would be challenging no matter what we did. So thankfully, we're able
Yeah.
to meet today.
Yeah, I'm really, really thankful for you taking the time to have this interview, even trying to find times to chat in Latin with international people is challenging being in Australia. So I'm really
I can
grateful for
imagine.
this.
Of course. Well, I'm personally grateful to you because I think you have a lot of amazing things that you're doing now, a lot of important things that you can tell us about your work and your experience in a field that a lot of us have been either, in my case, dabbling in or doing professionally, like yourself, which is teaching Latin actively in both senses. And currently, you're teaching it and you're doing it in an active manner. So if since you talked about it in the antipodal region, people might even be surprised. I don't know, is the fact that one can assume that Italians or Europeans might have an inherent interest in Latin for historical, architectural, linguistic reasons, and then by an extent, maybe it's surprising to Europeans. It's not surprising to me that there are a lot of Americans and Canadians that have an interest in Latin and ancient Greek, because why not? But then maybe people are surprised that there would be people in Australia as well. I'm not, but what is the environment like as far as the learning of Latin in schools?
It's very different state to state. So Victoria and New South Wales have a strong presence of Latin in high schools for reasons that I don't necessarily think are all to do with just interest in the language. There is a thing among students where they think that if they take Latin, it's going to boost their ATAR or their university entrance score. And I think there is possibly a bit of an idea of prestige about offering Latin in schools. However, there's also lovely Latin teachers who really are good at inspiring young people with a love for the ancient world, for the Romans, the Greeks, the imagination, the mystery, and the mythology. So among students, there's definitely a nerdy population who like Latin and who are supporting that for good reasons. There are also students who are supporting it for, I would think, to be the wrong reasons, which is just to boost their university entrance score.
So you're non-utilitarian.
Well, it's not
I'm not.
utilitarian. Even to boost your university entrance score is not a utilitarian thing, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
and I've been certainly part of a crowd that might be critical of the why learn Latin at all or why speak it. There's usually some seemingly logical reason for not doing any of those depending on the stage. Why learn Latin? It's a dead language. Why speak Latin when the goal is just to read it? Like, there's all these reasons that seem logical on the surface, which are, and then the thing that people try to come up with, especially in Italy, actually, is that, it's a forma mentis. This will change your forma mentis, the shape of your mind, so that you can, because make you more logical, which is odd because I've never heard of people learning Russian to have a more logical way of thinking, though maybe could help. One can, with almost any language, acquire that same kind of skill. It's just that through the past few centuries, most people's experience in learning a foreign language that wasn't, say, English or French or Spanish has been Latin. And then they're like, this makes you so much more, you understand these subtle things about language, and therefore it's Latin, not the language learning experience, which is responsible.
Yeah.
Oh wait, I just
Well, I
realized
think.
we're supposed to talk about the whiskera behind you because that's
Oh yeah,
unusual.
what is this?
What is this? I already got
lovely
used to it,
lady?
so I didn't even notice it anymore.
Oh, it's surprising. I'm making a series of videos for my year eights. My year eights have already had the last exam/test for the year, and some of them have already checked out because they're not doing Latin next year. So to try to placate them and show that Latin can be useful as well for people who don't continue Latin, I've decided to make a video series on the human body and introducing words to do with each of the viscera and big body parts like arms, legs, that kind of thing.
Well, you know what? If you're okay with it, maybe a little bit later, you could do a little bit of sort of a version of that for our audience. You can say like, "His un pulmone," said, "Hoc est jekur," and that kind of
That's
stuff.
right. Oh,
Yeah.
pulmones. They all
Odi
come
bone.
out as well,
Ooh.
which is
Horreo.
the delightful part.
Ooh.
My
Well,
science
if I had
department
hair,
at
they would
school.
horrere.
Yeah.
My beard hairs are horrent. Lovely.
Oh,
Wonderful. So all of you out there, if you have questions in general about some of the topics that we'll talk about today, Latin and ancient Greek pedagogy, because of course you do videos in ancient Greek. I loved the colors video. I got to see it again this morning and was really enthused by it because I thought it really covered the, I can't think of English now, sfumatura, nuance, there it is, of those details. And so if you have questions out there, go ahead and place them. We did get one, actually, before we started. Oh, we have a new member for the channel. Hello, Bill Starkey. Thanks for being a channel member. That's very nice of you. Also consider subscribing to Founds and Antiquity, everyone out there. Let's see. There was a question about this one, and we might get there. But maybe we can talk about them in detail today, but if you want to rattle off your top 3 resources for learning Latin, what are they, Carla?
oh. Well, it really depends on if you are like how old are you, and also are you an adult self-learner? Are you a very young child? They're not necessarily going to be the same top 3 resources I would recommend. I am
Start
in the
with
process of changing my mind about the top 3 resources, honestly, because I've always had an aversion to Lingua Latina per se illustrata. It's always like made my blood boil, but I'm starting to like it, even in spite of myself.
Oh, really? And since we
Just a
talked a
little
couple
bit.
weeks ago, I was you had mentioned that, and I thought, and today later, I think we should talk about some of your misgivings about the book, which I think is good for people to hear, especially because I'm such a loud proponent of it. So I like hearing contrary views, especially if the the thesis, the antithesis, and the synthesis creates a solution where the book is still useful to people.
Yeah.
And
I think
I've been reading more of the later chapters, which is what I was thinking would be. I like those later chapters a lot, pedagogically.
it's more like I've come to realize that there's a lot that's good about it, and the few tiny things that have been niggling me about it really shouldn't be overshadowing what's good about it. That's my sort of takeaway from it.
Sure. Well,
Yeah.
I think it's
Honestly,
fine. Go ahead.
the resource that I'm using with my students right at the moment is absolutely not the best resource. Like, I'm using the Oxford Latin course, which it'll do. It's like it's an ugly cousin of the Cambridge Latin course, and kind of strictly worse in every way. But
really? Strictly worse.
yeah, the only way it's better is that the grammar section is a little bit more organized, which now I've come to see is even not that big of an advantage. But Cambridge Latin course is the way that I learned it originally, and I found that their stories were so compelling and just so rich, varied in their locations, varied in terms of the types of plots they would have. There would be political intrigue, but also comedy, tragedy, bad medicine, bad astrology. Man, it was a really good series in terms of keeping you interested in the content that's being conveyed by the Latin language. And it's actually for free online right now, legally. You go onto the Cambridge Online website and you can read all the stories for free with vocab and grammar tools.
Wow.
Yeah. So if it was like,
Do you like
I don't
Cambridge
know.
Latin course?
Yeah. I really like Cambridge Latin course. That Lingua Latina per se illustrata. And then the third resource would be lots of input and from many different sources. So the novellas
like on your
that
channel.
have been, my channel. Go and watch Minecraftium or something.
That's
Have a
right.
laugh.
Or your stories. I really like those and the illustrations that go with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those things are very easy to digest, and you don't need to know hardly any Latin to be able to appreciate it. And novellas. People have been writing novellas in the last 5 years. And I really meant to take them with me into this room, but I was silly and left them downstairs.
Oh, it's okay. Well, yeah, there is a large number of them there they can be found pretty easily, thankfully. I think just something like Amazon Latin novella, and you get a lot of them like that.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Mm.
So what was that? Oh, okay. So one of the a way in which I and our friend Rafael Torrejano, when I were deeply flattered, is that you were actually making videos specifically about stuff that we were doing, which was it was nice because Rafael didn't actually appear in my video years ago on the Calabrese pronunciation or system of ancient Latin pronunciation, classical Latin pronunciation. And for those of you who aren't familiar, what Andrea Calabrese is, I guess he's technically an Italian American because he has American citizenship, but born in Italy, Italian linguist, researcher. And he recently, the past decade or so, made some really interesting conclusions about the fact that the typical model for the sounds of the Latin vowels just doesn't seem to match very well with evidence that we have, and also with the linguistic kind of proposition. Specifically, that I think the most significant finding of his through the linguistic analysis is that the short letter I and the short letter U, which in the way that it's normally pronounced in, say, Germany or the English-speaking world, as is I and U, which would correspond to, say, in my American English accent, of hit or put, that those vowels ought not to be prescribed as the actual qualities of short I and U, due to a number of reasons. One of them is that the most conservative Romance languages, like, say, Sardinian, don't show that kind of change. They don't change into like pirum or pira is pera is pera in Italian with a high e, pera, but it doesn't do that in, say, Sardinian or in Southern Lucanian. And so anyway, so the idea of that is that we probably ought not to do that or prescribe it, and that maybe Sidney Allen's conclusions aren't right. So I made a video about that, and that was thanks to Rafael Torrejano telling me about the paper, and then we continued to, that was actually the beginning of our collaboration and friendship.
I greatly appreciate your nerdery about pronunciation, because I do not have the access to the same vocabulary of how the sounds are changing. I just really appreciate people's conclusions and being like, that sounds great. Let's make resources with that.
Yeah. Well,
I guess I'm dangerous.
Well, I mean, the real, the power nerd here would be Raf, because I learned everything from him, essentially, besides the stuff I had read before. I owed quite a lot to him. And so that's where I got a lot of those ideas. So, and that was what our goal was with the Calabrese, I'll just call it Calabrese, the Calabrese pronunciation of Latin, which is essentially to turn I and U into E and U, even when short. That's the main part of it. And then to just maintain phonemic vowel length. That's really the thing that I have, I guess, and that is not
emphasized. Yeah, that is not normally emphasized at beginning level Latin. Like, you get the textbook explanation, which is like, it's A as in something, and P as in pot. pot with an aspirate in English. Like
Right.
it's yeah, the typical instructions are really quite misleading because they are written
Yeah.
in a textbook. And I got a comment in one of my earlier videos saying like, can you make a pronunciation guide video, please? And someone else
I love
commented
those.
on it and said they replied to it and said, you can work it out or something like that. It's like, no, obviously someone needs this resource. And I did do a search for it, and it was quite hard to find a resource that was not relying on similarity to English sounds as its basis.
Yeah. And so definitely check that out, everyone, on Found in Antiquity, because you did them in Latin, as I recall. There's 3 of them,
Yeah,
right?
it's all in Latin.
Yeah,
Nothing
but
is
very
in
easy to
English.
follow. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you put everything on the screen, so you're just like, it's really easy to understand what you're trying to do. So
Yeah.
it's
I hate it when
like,
people talk about pronunciation and like say a whole paragraph about the sound and then don't say the sound. Like that's the worst thing for me.
well, hopefully Raph and I weren't too guilty of that when we talked about Lucian pronunciation. Hopefully we had enough examples in there.
No, you
And
do have good examples. It's like I have distinct memories of people telling me while I was learning Latin, final M has to be nasalized. And I'm like, what does that sound like?
well, and I've been playing with a lot of variations through the years. I'm sure since you've been such a friendly supporter through the years and been listening to a lot of my content, you can hear stuff from years ago, which sounds different than what I do today. Because if especially I was because there's sort of a historical linguistic purity, and then on the other side there's a pedagogical reality. Now, everyone essentially is people can also confuse pedagogical convention or pedagogical convenience for proper convention, or I don't know, maybe I said those wrong. But anyway, the something like I had strong friendly arguments with colleagues about the pronunciation of the aspirates in ancient Greek, the letters that in English we call chi, theta, and phi. Ki, theta, pi, or chi, theta, phi, as we do in Lucian pronunciation. We do. Yeah. And
We do
so
it.
we do. Yay! I have another.
Yay.
We
I'm
we
a
all have an.
Lucianer.
Yes, that's right. Oh, you know what I also like to? Of course, obviously the name Lucian or Lucian can be called anyway. I have for whatever say Lucian, and you happen to say Lucian, and that's not a regional difference for our international non-English
I
native speaking
totally
audience.
did not notice that I was saying Lucian.
No, well,
It was
I like the variety. In fact, what I wanted to say is, since the name Lucius or Lucius, Lucian, the ancient Greek author, could be pronounced either way, which is great because one of the fundamental things that we wanted to do with Lucian or Lucian pronunciation is to demonstrate this is a way to kind of narrow in on something that is a more historical convention than other things out there. But that doesn't mean you can't do other variation things and other possibilities, which is so the very fact that the two of us who are actively using this pronunciation in our recordings even call it something a little with a tiny little different thing in English, I think is great. I think that's fundamentally exactly what I intended. So I think it's really great.
I
as
think
well.
it's a beautiful pronunciation scheme.
Oh.
Like I was hesitant about the fricatives at first. I was like, no, but I've just learned how to do aspirates properly. I can't get rid of those now. But actually having even the delta and what was the other one? Beta, they just sound so nice. They're like velvet to me.
Yeah.
Like just how beautiful they are.
Yeah, and I remember at first, because I think a lot of what people feel about pronunciation, especially of the two ancient languages, what that they feel is good or right or natural or weird or awkward or unfamiliar, or actually that's better. I think familiarity and unfamiliarity are actually the two kind of factors, like the making all the and all open in Latin, which is what Calabrese put forth and what Raph and I mostly do. Is something that just really alienates Italians.
Mm.
And one of the reasons is that all of their unstressed letter E and letter O, A and O are closed. So if we're saying si latine loquimur et semper aperte pronuntiamus, if we're always making them open like that, it sounds it does sound like Sardinian, and therefore it also sounds like sheep farmers or pastores.
Regional. It sounds
has,
regional.
Yeah, and that is just, even by people who like a lot of the stuff I've done, but if they're Italian, they find it ridiculous and unacceptable. Thankfully, Raf and I have examined the issue, and we can definitely see that by the 1st century AD, there's as good evidence of the vowels like the A and O closing in unstressed syllables. Like, a lot of those things become more of a possibility. So I suppose ultimately what I would want to promote with a Calabrese type pronunciation, I'm saying Calabrese type pronunciation, is phonemic vowel length is the phonemic factor. And Raf also, he's come around to agree with it too. Like, okay, whatever, if you want to make them open or closed, doesn't matter, just as much as that length portion. So
yeah, that length thing, absolutely. As I was saying, it is not usually the thing that is emphasized at lower level Latin. Neither the teachers nor the students seem to think that macrons matter at all, and like the teachers are not pronouncing macrons at year 7 and 8 level most of the time. They're printed in the text at that level, and then when you get to year 11 and 12, when you're translating authentic texts, usually the macrons have now disappeared, but now you're supposed to know them because they're in poetry.
Right.
It's so stupid.
After never having been pedagogically instituted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what I really like about Lucian pronunciation and Calabrese, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
We can use our native phonologies, Calabrese, Lucian. That's fine.
Calabrese, that they sound different from each other. Like Latin and ancient Greek sound like two different languages. When I first heard ancient Greek spoken aloud in Erasmian pronunciation, it sounded exactly like that speaker was speaking their version of Latin to me. And I was like, this is a scam. These are two completely different languages. Something's wrong with the whole system that's building up these things. If they end up sounding the same, then we're done for.
Well, you probably should read the essay I just published today on Patreon, because that's exactly what I did. So and this is not, I published on Patreon just because, I don't know, I think I put it on my website too. I just sort of wanted to spread it around a little bit, because I have found that people when trying to use the standard Lucian pronunciation variant can really miss the mark on some stuff, especially the fricative things. And maybe we just need more of content from you and others that are using it, the standard Lucian pronunciation with, auftos, or eufmorphos, and those kinds of things. Your retracted S sounds great too, by the way. It's really exciting to hear that from other people. It's like, wow, but we're using people retracted S. And
I get plenty of YouTube comments if I don't do a retracted S, so it's fine.
Really? You're kidding?
Yeah, that's like some of my old videos before I learned about retracted S. They're like, but the S should be now retracted. Like, well, okay, fine. So it's good. I feel like in order to improve your pronunciation, you work on one thing at a time. You see, maybe there's 2 or 3 things I could work on. For my Latin pronunciation anyway, I've been like gradually adding another feature that's just a little bit better. With Greek pronunciation, I've had to like redo it wholesale a few times.
Oh gosh, me too. I've worked really hard. I started from the beginning with Vox Graeca in hand. So then I came, this was 16 years ago. Then when I came to Italy to study ancient Greek in Florence University, I was just so irritated, because not only was phonemic vowel length not even, I taught myself Latin and hadn't really had to deal with academic conventional pronunciations of of either language. So hearing the Erasmian one, especially the fact it's still has long irritated me that epsilon let me say epsilon jota for our Greek audience, because they'll get mad if I say iota. I'm just kidding. Well, I'm not kidding. They do. They're not like that for whatever reason. They I don't want to say. I forgot what I was saying. Sorry, Carla.
Epsilon iota should
that it should be
not
E or
A
A.
or something.
Should not be A,
Yeah.
right. So here's the thing and it's so funny you just mentioned that, because I sort of caved to exactly what you said you preferred the opposite of. So I thought, well, okay, because the vast majority of people, really the practical answer to this is that, unlike you and me and Raf, and a few of our other friends and colleagues who are really super into recreating a pronunciation or establishing a convention that is more authentic in whatever subjective or objective way we think it might be subjective or objective. Basically, I just seeing people continue to struggle, because people hear something like Lucian pronunciation. They might associate it with modern Greek or Booth Koine pronunciation, which they've already rejected because it's too complicated for them or too different from the
they say
orthography.
that all the diphthongs are gone. I don't like it. Like, the diphthongs are still there. A lot of them are still there.
Yeah,
they're not all conflated.
Exactly, except for the long diphthongs, all of them are represented in some particular way. And so what I decided was, okay, just sort of can we find another middle ground here that would help? And so I came up with this thought of doing, okay, well, what would the ancient Roman accent have been?
Wait, I misread this. I thought this was just like what Greek speakers sounded like in the Roman period, but is this Latin speakers learning Greek?
That is what this is supposed to be. So, Romaic is sort of what I came up with, that little name, just a way to give like, okay, because really there's like in all the variants of Lucian pronunciation, there's options. Like here, I have an asterisk next to the Z, next to the zeta, because is it zeta or zeta or zeta? And then I talk about the Z discussion below. So,
well, on a related note, I would love it if someone could make a Lucian or Booth Koine pronunciation, probably Booth Koine pronunciation, that has an Aramaic accent. Like, I would love to hear how that would sound.
Cool. Well, that's I think Ben Cantor, he's working on that pretty well, the koinegreek.com fellow. Yeah. So anyway, the idea here, and actually I'm kind of springing this on you because I wasn't. It's just funny that you said that I like Lucian pronunciation because it sounds like a real language that doesn't sound like Latin. And here I just wrote this essay to basically say, okay, I know you don't like how it sounds so different from Latin. Here, make it as Latin. Use your Latin restored classical pronunciation, and
sound like a Latinist trying to speak Greek.
Well, if someone has spent a lot of time, or if they have a pretty good sounding restored classical Latin pronunciation, then they could do this. And how do they do their CH? Or, that's a good question, but let me make them aspirates this time. Enarche en hologos kai hologos en proston theon kai theos en hologos. If it's the chance. So, yeah. So, and that's basically the idea of like, okay, just read this like Latin, and then what do you get? Use that. Basically, the idea is to do that. And and again, this is mostly, I think, just to get people off of making this A. And making this E instead. So right. That is to get them into something that's more historical than Erasmian. And then from there, they can, play with the other variants of Lucian pronunciation. So
no, I'm one who's like really into the aesthetic of the uniqueness of Greek versus Latin pronunciation. I feel like if Greek was the dominant language of the Roman Empire, we'd probably be pronouncing Latin as if it was sounding like Greek, but just because Latin was in the Western half, and the Western half didn't get taken over by Arabs and stuff, it's all. I think there's something really special about Greek that gets maybe overlooked if people are a lot stronger in Latin than in Greek, which I'm a lot more strong in Latin than Greek, and I want to build up
I
my Greek
know
skills.
like two people who are stronger in Greek than Latin. Who are they? It was definitely Christoph Rico, because he spends all his time on ancient Greek and he is the fabulous exemplar of it. But yeah, that's sort of the. It's interesting too because there's not a whole lot of Latin and ancient Greek for the. I mean, depending on what era of ancient Greek you're reading. I mean, if you're reading Lucian or something, or more later Imperial Roman Koine literature, you'll find some more Latin stuff. But in general, the idea of just the importation of so much Greek into Latin makes Latin the gateway drug and makes it inevitable. That's why you can't get around learning ancient Greek
Gateway drug
at
is a
some
good,
point.
yeah, absolutely. Gateway drug is Latin. But I also really like pitch accent in ancient Greek. I've when I was young, I was exposed to a lot of Mandarin Chinese, and it was just it's a given to me that languages can have tonal qualities. I'm not saying that ancient Greek is a tonal language the same way that Chinese is, but there are pitch-like elements in both. And I think that people dismiss pitch accent as too hard and impossible and irrelevant. And I'm like, but this was a part of the language. It was how it sounded, at least part of the history. And I think that there just needs to be heaps more material of pitch accented ancient Greek to make it seem normal and cool and okay to learn. I made a pitch accent ancient Greek video because I was all sick of all this dismissal of pitch accents.
Oh, it's fantastic. Because I think it's partially the precise realization of the pitches that people get hung up on, like, oh, well, we can't know. And it's really, I think, the lack of people trying. And also before this modern, wonderful world that we have with the internet, where we can just make hours and hours and hours of audio for people to listen to and to practice, when before there was just, a book. I don't remember when the original ancient Greek Asimiel course was made, but they made CDs with that. Maybe it was the 90s. And of course, I utterly detest those recordings. They're so terrible.
Really?
Oh,
I've never heard them. So
they're essentially a Erasmian with aspirates, and it's a German man and a French woman in the recordings that I've heard, and their accents are really strong. And I love German and French accents. I playfully use a German accent for one of my characters in Latin, and that's out of affection, not out of ridicule. Nevertheless, when it comes to...
I'm just really conscious that we've spent about 30 minutes talking about pronunciation, and that maybe pronunciation is not everyone's favorite topic.
Well, and you're right. Well,
I see a comment here that says comprehensible input method for Latin.
Oh yeah, you think yes? Good point. We talked a little bit about the books, but you're right, because I did want to get to sort of the nux huius argumenti, which would be the medulla, right? Which would be what
the core.
That's right. What is the so textbooks? If we're not using textbooks, what do we do?
Oh, well, the first question is, why should you not use textbooks? Because textbooks are like the center of every Latin course that is taught, and usually the first thing that gets recommended for students picking up Latin. I mean, there are good things about textbooks in that they are made specifically for learners, and they explain things, and they try not to overwhelm you. But the core difficulty I find with textbooks is that the grammar is introduced very slowly. The vocab is introduced very fast, and there's not enough stories per level to make you really master the language before moving on to the next chapter.
So you're not a Wheelox fan then?
Oh, no. Oh, not really, no.
Neither am I.
But yeah, no, I'm not even that big of a fan of lingua latina per se illustrata for that reason. I mean, there's a good thing that it's so full of stories and that there are lots of materials that are supplementary that help pad out the stories that you need. But there's a fundamental weakness to introducing grammar concepts late when a learner is reading a story and expecting that grammar to be there naturally. Like an example would be, an example is the past tense not appearing until about halfway through the course. The Oxford Latin course is very guilty of this too. A lot of courses are guilty of some omission.
Right, sheltering.
But yeah. And it's not natural. It's not something that anyone who is a native speaker would really be conscious of them avoiding the past tense. Like, you don't know that you're using the subjunctive when you're speaking in English, or that you're using a conditional in English when you're talking to a kid. You
Do
just
people still use the subjunctive in English?
Cutesy. Oh yeah, I guess. I mean, we have some weird conditional.
If I were teaching English.
Yeah,
No, we do.
that's right.
Well, oh gosh, yeah. It's important that he or she do it instead of does it. And whatever. I'm the last person that still uses any of those.
Yeah.
I think.
English has some complexities that we don't even notice as native speakers, but we happily pass it along to children whenever it's the right situation to use that word. So in Lingua Latina per se Illustrata, there's a chapter where the kids punched each other and got each other upset. And then along comes the parents and they ask, what happened? The story then gets retold in the present tense, but it should have been retold in the past tense. Like, that is the
reason is that it was still going on, because he's still doing it. That's why, because it wasn't actually past tense.
Oh, okay,
right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you're right.
My reading of the situation was that a punch has happened. Someone started crying because of that punch that happened in the past. The parents came over and asked what happened. Like, in my opinion, that would have been...
Yeah, because he's still doing that.
He's not while his parents are there telling him.
Well, he doesn't know they're there.
Oh, okay. I must have misread
they're over
that.
in the other room because they're like maybe they're. It's a villa. I think it's pretty big, right? So maybe this is what, because I was taking it very literally, present tense, without any kind of like transmogrification in my own head of a different, like a headcanon of a different verbal tense. But I imagine so Quintus comes out from that space because over there Marcus is still tormenting Julia, and she's still going, and he's still like, they're still doing that, and
punching sounds happening in the background.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
It is highly simplified though. But once there's a little bit more, like by chapter 20, I think it reads very naturally.
Oh yes, and David Amster in the chat is saying the present tense to narrate something in the past is very common. Yes, but true. you have to realize that that's something like you're telling a vivid story. But when someone has asked you what's caused something to have happened, why is someone upset, you're going to use the past tense, or at least the perfect with have kind of thing. You're not going to be like, he goes up to me and he punches me, Mum.
Yeah. And that, yeah, exactly. And that's the point you're making about it not being like any other typical textbook, not rather sheltering stuff, and where we would expect them to be found in Antiquity. So I'm rewriting the URL here so I can put it up on the screen.
Yeah, so it leads to some glitches in student understanding. Sometimes students expect a more complicated sentence than is present in the Latin. Like there are some sentences in the Oxford Latin course. I'm not plugging the Oxford Latin course, by the way, not sponsored by them, not even recommending them. But there are things like, I am ready, I'm coming now, says a character. And or I'm ready, I'm leaving now, or something like that. And the students are interpreting it as, I'm ready to leave now. And they haven't learned the infinitive yet. Or like, maybe it would have been a gerund construction. Parata sum ad discedendum, or something like that. They haven't been introduced to any of that, but because the force of the sentence would have made more sense as a more complex sentence, they interpreted that extra layer onto it. which isn't there.
Which is, of course, how
Um,
language is acquired naturally, and without any. I mean, parents will, and perhaps to a fault, speak to their children in a babyish way because they think that makes it more comprehensible. Maybe it does. I don't know enough about the neurolinguistics
it's
of young
cute.
children.
I think half the time it's because it's endearing.
Yeah.
But still, they'll use all the irregular verbs. They'll
Yeah, they're not
say
gonna. Yeah.
can, could. They'll say brought. Although kids take a while to learn brought, that's fine. But
Brang.
yeah, oh man, they're yes, so cute.
Yeah.
And parents are not judgy of kids making cute mistakes like that.
Right.
It's something that we need in language teaching, is not to be like, oh, brang, wrong, cross, write it out again now.
Well, and I'm so used to that as being the default in avoiding overcorrection and bringing in correction only when it's especially important or even when it's deliberately requested. It's like, no, maybe we shouldn't. It's not always good because almost every mistake can be corrected with time, and thus you get a better foundation rather than the psychological effect, the affective filter of being constantly corrected, even if it's done lovingly, may lead to negative results ultimately. So, and that's actually revolution. It's still revolutionary, I think, for
it is revolutionary.
people in
I'm
the
really
classics.
excited about hearing about the mass comprehensible input method for other languages, like the method that Matt versus Japan has been using all for many years to learn Japanese to a near native level. I'm going to be
only
using.
We had input like on Link.
Yeah. Or if only we could create lots of input that is easy and tangible, and
Exactly. Pulmo kekidit. There it is, natural past tense. Pulmo kekidit. Pulmo kadit. It's falling now? Not anymore. Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm going to use that to start learning Italian in December, and I'm really excited about that. But that mass comprehensible input method, it is very much about having lots of input, and any errors that you're making throughout this process, they're just going to naturally correct as you get more data for your brain to absorb. That's what I'm hoping. I'm deliberately not going to do a whole lot of deliberate grammar study in Italian. I probably have a fair amount of Latin grammar that's going to be cheating for me. I don't know how closely Italian grammar resembles Latin grammar, but
enough that I'm excited to hear, actually. That'd be really cool, especially because you're an ancient language teacher, enthusiast, and students, in the sense that we're always learning our languages. So then for going a student of ancient languages into where you already have such good phonology and active skills, I think those of us who know you'll be really excited to see what you make of it. So awesome. What's your plan with that?
Yeah.
With the Italian? Do you have like some channels set up, or do you want some recommendations? Or
my plans are that Lingua Latina like Italian book.
That's on Ion Academy.
Yeah, I'm not going to try to pronounce the title because I haven't really learnt Italian phonology properly
Italian
yet.
by the Nature Method is the translation.
Italian by the Nature Method. That one, the mini stories on Link, and anything else I can scrounge about on Link that interests me. Haven't really looked there yet beyond the mini stories. Ollie Richards' short stories in Italian, and all those lovely podcasts from Podcast Italiano. It's Alyssa, not Alyssa.
Yes.
Sonia Candy. I just love to just do a lot of input.
That's the crew.
And
that's us.
Yeah.
Or them. I don't do Italian stuff, but that's what they do.
Yeah. Now, I really want to emphasize listening a lot, and try to get things through the ear. I think that's one of the major weaknesses of textbooks, main series textbooks. We're fixing it by recording audio of textbooks, but a lot of the time when people use a textbook, they don't even know that a good quality audio recording exists.
Right.
I mean, there's a CD that goes with the Cambridge Latin course, but
is it?
I haven't listened to it for over 10 years,
Is it
but
dodgy?
I liked it when I was a student.
Mm, yeah.
I don't know how good the pronunciation is now, but it seemed good to me.
Mm,
But hardly ever do you hear it played in class, or the
right.
teacher really nicely pronouncing things aloud in class. It's
Hmm.
very, yeah.
Well, it's a shame. It's a shame. It's probably because, I keep thinking about how vehemently I talked about pronunciation. It's like it should be this way, and I was almost prescribing things, and like how can you use this convention when it's wrong and
How
all
dare
that,
you
and
go?
yeah. So right, and so on these occasions, even when I'm with a fellow enthusiast of pronunciation, I like to add how there are lots of ways to learn these languages, and using conventional pronunciations, even with strong accents, whatever accent that might be, maybe a strong British accent in the case of that course. I
Yeah.
think probably if we just want to really acquire the language, having an enthusiastic narrator is probably yet more essential. So it's interesting and
Yes.
fun to listen to. It's dynamic.
Expression covers many sins.
Yeah. And like as you
Oh,
probably well know, when I speak spontaneously in Latin, my pronunciation's all over the place. When I do recitations, I'm much better at keeping the pronunciation I want. But people tend to usually find that input interesting anyway, even though I'm not doing a perfect pronunciation, because I'm usually
yeah.
enthusiastic about what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we're getting
Good-
into pronunciation again. But
oh dear.
Aurelia in the comments has
Yes,
said
I want
it's easy to put down textbooks or styles. But is there an inclusive system available? One that includes everything? If not, we need to use the tools available. This is the kind of attitude which I think we need to break out of. The idea of you have to tick off every single grammar box, and then when you've done that, you've learnt the language. Because you've gone through a course that has like an explicitly included grammar thing for everything that it decides that is all the stuff in Latin, then you're ready for you'll find authentic text easy because you've done the grammar before. Like, that is absolutely not the case, because for one thing, no textbook includes all the grammar that there is in Latin. There's all these extra tiny little things that you keep finding afterwards. Like, I never knew that there was an ablative of such and such.
right.
Like, it's going
Or
to
the
pop
fact
up.
that
Something else is going to
rete,
pop up.
yeah, like rete is
Yes.
retia, like mare maria, but rete doesn't have an ablative form reti that's attested. It's always rete, in rete,
Oh,
for
well,
example.
there you go. That
And
never
it's like,
got
why
explained
is
to me.
that?
Why didn't they
Well,
explain it to me? You cannot
yeah.
have, none of the textbooks explain everything. But then of course the thing that people will come back is like, yeah, but it's explaining the major stuff. So okay, explaining the major stuff, but you're also going to get all the major stuff if you do a mass comprehensible input method. In fact, you'll get it in a better sequence than anyone can prescribe for you, because what they're prescribing is that you master the accusative case first, and then master the whatever case, then learn the tense system, then learn subjunctives, and then gerundives right at the end. But what people have been finding, like, this was I do not have the link on me, but an article that I read from a teacher of Latin in the States was that when he was getting students to learn things through mass comprehensible input with no sheltered grammar, he found in their free writing tasks that students were mastering gerundives of purpose before they were mastering accusatives.
Wow.
They were routinely mucking up the case system, but gerundives, easy. Oh, chuck in an ad effugiendum, to flee in there, absolutely easy. So what we think of as it's got to be in the late part of the course is actually not accurate to what our natural acquisition order is. And textbooks, they're not aware that that's happening. They're built into this kind of tradition that the cases have to be learnt first, and that Also, the idea is that you have to learn what's being presented to you 100% before you can then get a single extra item of grammar put on top of that.
Being comfortable with ambiguity.
Yeah, exactly. Being comfortable with ambiguity is not something
That's
that a
the
Latin
hardest
textbook
lesson.
teaches you.
That's hard for anyone to get used to, but I think it's one of the most important language lessons to deal with. Ambiguity.
Yeah.
And everyone out there, I'm scouring all the other comments and questions that you've made. If we don't address them today, keep writing them and hopefully repeat them if we didn't get them immediately. Other than that, of course, you can write them in the comments on the video later, and we'll love to get to them. I wanted to talk about even in the sheltered approach of presenting grammar, like in ancient Greek in particular, it's so difficult to express anything without third declension nouns or second declension nouns that are feminine or masculine nouns of the first declension or something. Because we're Latin, they happen to have become rather regular, and Greek retains some of that more archaic Proto-Indo-European. It's not a regularity per se, but it's a variety which doesn't lend itself to the. It's wonderful. Or me verbs like didoshin. And I found in attempting to do ancient Greek in action that I just had to, my resolution was I need to give third declension nouns before I even give sentences. And just hope that they'll get used to it, because it's not as convenient as, say, like Familia Romana, which avoids it for 8 wonderful chapters of pedagogically wonderful chapters. People are welcome to dislike it, but I think they're very effective.
I don't like that Familia Romana puts in fluius before flumen. I like flumen.
Right, and it uses lots of and it does that just to try to teach you fluius flui. I wouldn't say anything is truly wrong in those in the earlier chapters, but it's clearly designed to be pedagogically simplified and sheltered, and but it can be really hard, and especially with, and not only hard, but I'm sort of approaching it from in ancient Greek. You just can't get by. You cannot really express living situation things without aorist imperatives, which is why Christoph Rico in his Polis book makes that the first chapter, which is a rather brilliant move. And
I'm a huge fan of the total physical response, or TPR, method of introducing new concepts, or just getting students involved in paying attention to true communication that's happening in the classroom. TPR is authentic in a way that pretend role plays can't be. If I point to something and be like, this is, esta, do you call this a stylus, or do you call it something else? Calamus, that's the word.
Calamus is
stylus. I like to call it stylus, but
stylus is fine. It would be like the difference between. I think it's I'm trying to think of what. I assume Australian vocabulary is similar to British, and I don't know, torch instead of flashlight or things like that. But we all get by. We all understand what we're saying. It's fine.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be very confused probably if I were in Melbourne.
But it's real. When it's something that is really happening, you're saying a statement that's true. I think the brain really knows when it's just pretend and it's done as a language exercise versus, oh, this is a real fact.
What about seeing people to whom it's actually happening, as opposed to you experiencing it yourself? So a simulated TPRS, where you see that, the Christoph Rico's videos on Polis from years ago, where he actually is doing lesson 1 with students who have never experienced ancient Greek before.
Yes, I think that is also very real, because you can see that did literally happen in that video.
Yeah.
If I take out a lung here, that really did happen, even though you're not in the room with me. This pulmonem extraho, it's true. It's true. It's real. And so I think there's some huge strengths to TPR, and that's not being conveyed by any textbook, because a textbook is written so far ahead of time that you're not in the same room. You're not even seeing something happen at the same time as reading a textbook. Videos can capture true events that happened photographically, and textbooks can't do that. So what was the case that we've been making against textbooks? Grammar sequencing. It was no textbook actually covers all the grammar, and they're not really teaching you to tolerate ambiguity. There isn't so much of a tangible immediacy to it like there is in TPR. And also, I think like the final point that I might make about it is that when you're open to mixing things up and adding things in from multiple different sources, you get to experience more than one style of Latin, and you get to follow your interests a bit more, which is sort of why I'm making a series of Latin in Minecraft videos, because my year 8s and my year 7s love Minecraft, and they laugh their butts off when I do something silly in Minecraft in Latin.
That's wonderful. And more of the affective filter. They're enjoying it. It's something they're familiar with, and they're laughing. They're excited. Exactly, and that's such a huge key. And the reading method is good for people who like to read. People don't like to read. They might not enjoy reading methods as much as we might laud them. I'm trying to get to some of these comments. So as a Portuguese native speaker, would it be worth Latin to learn other Romance languages? It depends what your goal is. If you also want to learn Latin, then learn Latin, sure, whenever you want in that sequence. You don't have to learn it before or after. And I actually did a video about that a little while ago. If you search for it, you'll find it on this channel. Online classes, I don't currently do them, but I do recommend ancientlanguage.com. And I believe if I read your comments and responding to people also asking you, you'd also, because of your full-time teaching schedule, aren't taking any, but if that changes in the future, stay attentive. That's so funny. Stay attentive to Found in Antiquity channel, Carla's channel. So
one day I might go rogue and just teach adults instead of hormonal teenagers.
Yeah. Look, thank you, Romanophony. And let's see. I don't know if you saw any others you wanted to respond to. Oh, well, this is always entertaining as a discussion point. Latin replacing English as an or the official language of the European Union. Is it an effective way to revive Latin? Well, we should probably talk about the redi vivus sermo Latinus, the fact that Latin has not died in the sense that people normally think of as dead, that is, people don't speak it or know how to communicate in it. Latin, I think, is more active and revived even probably than really strict biblical Hebrew was 150 years ago, before the actual, the attempt to truly revive it, because there's never been a break. Latin has been spoken by people for a long, long time. So, I mean, utilizing something like trying to make Latin an auxiliary language of a giant political entity as an attempt to revive a language because we like Latin to make it popular, I don't know if that's really something that in the past I was really behind that kind of thing, and now I'm like, I don't think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
What do you think, Carla?
I'd say about the same. It's like, just get people interested in the language and give them opportunities to speak it. We don't have to force it on anyone. If it ever gets adopted as an official language, great. But I would prefer that to be the case if it had already become quite an established spoken language.
Yeah, it has to be from the vox populi. I mean, it has to be people like really wanting it. I mean, English has already just been an international language for so long. It's already not even really the property of us, of native speakers. It is to some degree, and it's anchored in our native speakers in Australia, US, Canada, UK, Ireland.
I like that India. You put Australia on the first part of that list.
It's alphabetical. Actually, it wasn't alphabetical, but it
usually the last.
It's like, oh yeah, and then on the other opposite side of the world, yeah, the antipodal language.
New Zealand, by the way, is not remembered at all.
Did I not say New Zealand?
Oh, maybe
I don't know. I said them so. I'm sorry, New Zealand. I love New Zealand. English and
They're busy being left off the
there.
map.
They're so lovely. And yeah, so I don't know. I'd say I don't think it's necessary.
I don't
And
think
I
it's
would.
important to make it an official language to make it worthwhile. It's like saying that, oh, once it's become an official language, now there's a reason to study it. But no, actually, a lot of very unofficial languages are really worth learning. Indigenous languages are worth learning. Crazy Asian languages that have no written form are really worth learning. I think all languages are really worth learning, no matter how official or unofficial they are.
Right, exactly. It's so specific. There's a kind of what I just keep experiencing both in myself through the years and interacting with others, whether it's something really specific like subjective pronunciation preferences or interests in a language, or my language is closest to Latin or something like that, is all of this is emotionally and subjectively tied together. And that's not wrong, just as much as I happen to like the color red. That's just a subjective preference. It's not wrong, but the fact that I like red doesn't mean that red is the color that everybody should like. And I guess that's sort of what darn, that sounded good when I started. Now I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Like, where did this go?
It's just all the whiskera. Non possum. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh no, it's very off-putting, eh?
No, it's not. I think it's really cool. It gives some variety to the background. I would have put that on the thumbnail. We're gonna get to the guts of this argument, people.
The guts.
Yeah. So I really find that, because I felt that kind of bias once, like, oh, Italian is the closest language to Latin of the, whatever languages sets you would want to talk about, which ignores Sardinian and a whole other suite of factors, which makes that a much more complex question than we would really like to consider. Oh yeah, Aurelia has asked this question, and what do you think about this? Recommendations for young children for Latin.
Oh my goodness, young children love Minecraftium. Like, I didn't even specifically make it for primary age students, but primary age students really like it. Teachers on the Latin Facebook groups have been sharing it with their young students and just finding really good results. I also have quizzes entirely in Latin on my blog that are based on each of the episodes of Minecraftium, so you can get even more input in a more interactive way. It'll be just Latin, a picture, what is this? It's a cow, and then maybe a thing that's describing a scene, what's the most accurate thing to press. So I highly recommend my Minecraftium series for very young children.
There you go. Subscribe to Found in Antiquity. James was asking these questions about offering a comprehensible input method. Well, You already
do.
Yeah, I just need to make more videos in it. It's the Lingua Latina Comprensibili series. I was actually thinking of doing the next video for the Numerare Numos, which is I have a bunch of Numi Europai that I was going to use for it. I just haven't gotten around to it because I have like 5 other videos.
Yeah, your videos are synced to Lingua Latina per se Illustrata, but because I hate that book, actually I don't hate that book anymore, but because I'm a rogue who doesn't like textbooks that much, all my videos are not synced to any textbook, so you can use them with any textbook because they're equally ill-suited to match with any textbook, which is great. That's my assumption from the beginning. You're not having any other help from a textbook to watch and enjoy my videos. There are subjunctives in Minecraftium, and none of my students have complained about that. I don't think they've even noticed it, but they're there.
Really interesting experiment. Yeah, and it's so hard to express things in like just saying I think that something and say Italian. You have to use the subjunctive. Penso che sia. I think that it be, not that it is. So
I'm constantly asking, like, I'm asking things like, Oh, what does the goat eat? Oh, I don't know what the goat eats. And that uses a subjunctive. But,
Yeah,
I just use
exactly.
it. And kids don't complain.
Thank you, Romano Foni. Hey, Andrea. Ciao, Andrea. Andrea's here. He was in the last video. Why does Wikipedia still use the Vox-Latina pronunciation for Latin? Well, I mean, it's only been a few years that Raf and I started talking about, hey, maybe this isn't the totally. I mean, there's nothing essentially. I would say that it represents a small possibility as a complete system of the pronunciation, but I wouldn't say it's impossible that ancient Romans could have spoken in that way, depending on the century or location. But I don't think it's the best representation of the language as a whole. That's my my take on it, especially if it's done really well. There are some people like Alex Foreman who does it without a trace of his native English-speaking accent. And it sounds good. So he does like a velar L, and he does the I and the U. But he's also a fluent Arabic speaker, in which those sounds actually occur. And because of that, he sounds really good, and it's very pleasant to listen to. So a lot of the characteristics of even something like that are usually due to other factors that go beyond, those simple phonemes. So, but actually, Vox Latina are just Wikipedia's been adding retracted S's everywhere now. I don't know who's doing it, but thank you. Obviously, it was worth it making those videos
It's
just to get that.
spreading.
It's spreading. We already addressed this? I suppose yes.
Oh, Relux Latin. It's just another grammar translation method that doesn't have enough input for it's teaching you the grammar rules but not making you get used to them. And that's the problem with Relux Latin, with Jenny's Latin, with oh my goodness, my least favorite one, if I can bag something out in name, is So You Really Want to Learn Latin? It's my least favorite because it was at the school that I'm currently working at before I changed the textbook to a Oxford Latin course. But I changed it to Oxford Latin course because we already had a class set and we couldn't afford buying a new Cambridge Latin course. But So You Really Want to Learn Latin?
Like you, who uses comprehensible input methods in the classroom and TPRS and all those kinds of things, it matters probably a little bit less the structured textbook course that you follow if you can make those things vivid in the classroom.
Yeah. Oh, if your teacher is already brilliant at coming up on the fly with Latin stories and with talking in Latin to you, it doesn't matter whether you use a textbook at all or you use Wheelox. But the problem is that most teachers aren't there yet or don't think that they could ever be there yet. I certainly wasn't there when I was starting out a few years ago. It's teachers depend a lot on the textbook when they're planning everything. Oh man, so You Really Want to Learn Latin is it gives you a paragraph of English explaining a grammar point with a table, and then it gives you all these mechanical drills. And I just found when my students were I got the students who had just learnt that method for maybe 3 years. They started in primary school in year 4 or year 5. They got up to year 7 or year 8. And in year 8, they've been in the language for like 4 years now, if they've done it since year 4. No, maybe 3 years, 3 full years. They'd be given a 3-word sentence containing the vocabulary that they'd had all these vocab tests on, and they don't know how to translate it. It's like puella agricolam amat. And they're like, I don't know what to do. I've never seen kids so helpless as when they were learning from So You Really Want to Learn Latin.
There you go. Here is the one. Do you know this one, School Song Latin for Children? I'm not familiar.
I don't know that.
Okay. Well, we'll look into it. This one, so this is an audiobook. I saw the Latin by the Ranieri dialing method, and I have a video about this. And this is probably a great example of what works for some people doesn't work for others. I have found that in general, at some point during the learning of Latin, it could be very late, it could be very early, it can be useful to learn the paradigms in a mechanical way, to be able to say rosa, rosai, rosai, rosam, rosa, which is what the ancients would do too when they would learn ancient Greek, or Greeks learning Latin and so forth, because they found that useful to be able to recall all of the forms. But this is not
Do
something
Russian speakers and other inflected language speakers do the same?
when you learn Russian, yeah, you want to learn the paradigm.
Oh no, not learners, but native speakers. Do they learn paradigms?
Yeah, they do. In school, at some point, they learn them so they can, rattle them off. And they usually frame it by the question word, like chem or kavor, which is the genitive, like kavor, so the answer to kavor, like, I don't know what's a word that I can think of off the top of my head.
Oh, so they have it actually as
Or
a
like
full
kuyus.
sentence then? Like, here's a situation, question
Right.
about it, answer is using
the
the
last
target case.
Excuse me, Redout. Yeah, the last chapter of Familia Romana is actually not an original. It's from an ancient grammarian, where you have the student and the teacher, where this is like a 10-ish age student, like around their native Latin speaker, but in their native speaker class of Latin, they're taught grammatical terminology. So they answer to cujus. I don't know. Let's see, hominis. So at cui, homini, quem, homine, that kind of thing. And it has that kind of
That's
example, very similar to what
meaningful.
Russians do. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I would totally support that kind of question answer target form, because it's coming in a context. It's got a there is an implied sentence around that one word. I actually also get my students to memorize tables of case endings. I have a different case order because I'm Australian and I follow the UK case order, which is not really invented in the UK. It's the Rasmus Rask nominative. I include the vocative, nominative, vocative, accusative, genitive, dative, ablative.
The Germanic way. That's what German does. It's a Northern European innovation.
Oh,
not being
the one
British.
German Latin teacher I spoke to had it in the nominative genitive order.
The ancient one, the ancient Greek and Roman order.
Yeah, but honestly, it's an external help. It's like memorizing a table that you look up when you need to, which it's a tool. It's
a tool.
It's not necessarily going to. I don't think that memorizing a table is going to be any better than writing it on your hand, except that you're allowed to memorize it and you're not allowed to write it on your hand,
Right. Yeah, and this thing it's a great example of, like, because I know that it worked for me, but I know it definitely doesn't work for every student I've had. So I usually don't prescribe learn all of these grammar things beforehand. Memorize all these grammar tables. It can appeal to some people. It worked for me. But what I do is I say, if we're using Familia Romana, when we get to a complete table, which we don't have until chapter 7, then I say, okay, now you're kind of expected to be able to get used to this declension. And therefore, if you want to memorize, it's probably a good idea. But even then, maybe that's not necessary because the student already understands it. It's a tool.
I totally support using it after you've seen the words in a natural context. I wouldn't, for young students especially, I would not front load it and say, everyone, let's say it together. Actually, I don't do it with full words, but the other thing that I'm thinking about when I talk about the case endings in the table, or words with the cases attached to them, is that if the case system is naturally very late acquired, like was suggested by the American Latin teacher who said they were making accusative case errors, but they were nailing the gerundive of purpose. Like, if that's the case, then they're probably not going to acquire the case system by the end of their schooling years. Like, there's a lot of common errors that I find in year 12 translations that are due to them not seeing the accusative case in the flow of reading something. And like that suggests to me that even the time that I have in school is not enough to teach them the accusative case naturally, necessarily. Not for every student, but every student can take however many minutes it takes to memorize a table and at least they have that tool to use before they've properly internalized it.
Right. Because that's the difference between ideal and practical application. And a significant practical limitation is teaching. You only have so many hours in a school week. A person who's learning on one's own, well, that's different. When I was learning Latin, I was spending all waking hours on it for 3 months, and that's how I then had transcribed from Via Romana.
Yeah.
And I found
And
that
if
very
you're an adult self-learner and you want to be part of a Discord community that's communicating in Latin, and you want to not be constantly corrected for your forms or something, and you want to kind of use forms that look nice, then you might as well memorize that table and just look it up mentally or physically every time you need to.
Right.
There could be a practical use for that, to not look. Maybe not everything's about looking smart or looking stupid, but you could polish your writing more by using it that way.
Exactly. It's all about goals and what we're after. Andrea asks, excuse me, how advanced is research on language teaching methods? How high is the degree of subjectivity? Are most teachers relying on legitimate personal experience, or is there a wide research-based consensus?
There's a lot of research about the effectiveness of reading versus explicit grammar teaching. That's the I hate that Krashen is the only name that I can remember, but if you look up Krashen, he's still publishing a lot of stuff that is very research-based and very strident in the direction of teach via input, and the grammar will sort itself out most of the time. I'm maybe not quite as extreme as that, but there's a lot of research backing. There's a lot of research backing the natural acquisition hypothesis, which is that there are some forms that, even though they look super simple and easy, like accusative case in Latin, or the S on the end of third person singular verbs in English, they are just acquired late, and there's nothing that you can do to make them acquired early.
That's interesting. Which would make a lot of sense too about how they transformed. Yeah, there's a lot of research, and it's ongoing. And anything that applies to modern languages applies, I think, also to the ancient ones. So this is Paolo asks about learning Latin with input when you're in a translation-oriented one in Italy. And I know that most it's, I think, pretty bad, and it's unfortunate because per capita, Italians learn Latin more than anyone else in the world in school, but they learn it in almost certainly the worst ways possible in general, which is very emphasizing translation. And the thing is, it's not that unfortunately, based on the research that I have seen, and based on my experience with, anecdotal experience with lots of students who have had translation methods primarily in their background, is that translation method of teaching Latin is not only not helpful, but actually detrimental. And the reason is that the students I've had, for example, they were native speakers of English, and they wanted to transition. And as you had, I really like your video where you talk about going from a silent to a speaking, input-based teacher and reader of Latin. And that's, I like how you're documenting that too. I think that's really encouraging to people. But in this situation, because what happens if they, like, a lot of them have been teachers for years, and they've used these grammar, and they're used to translation. So what they've had done is for years train themselves that their experience with Latin, it could also be ancient Greek, whatever, their experience with Latin is when they see a word, it's instantly translated into English. That is the physical process of going from Latin word to the dictionary to writing down an English word. They were just memorize that dictionary part, and then they go to English word. So their automatic reflex, why did I put the accent there? I thought like reflex. Il riflesso. I don't know. That doesn't make sense.
I've got a little bit of a different opinion about that. I don't know. I'm open, but it's in my experience, I learned through a translation method, like heavily translation method,
completely
most of my life.
too. It's impressive.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
But like, I was definitely sinning in that I was turning Latin into English in my head. But even with that, after reading enough Latin, you start to learn words in Latin that you can't express in English. Like you start to read something like, oh yeah, so that, how do I say that in English now?
All the
But I
time. Isn't that great?
understand it. So I think that even if you start off with a heavily translation approach, if you just keep reading Latin, you're going to internalize it in a healthy, natural way eventually, despite your beginnings. I don't think it's going to, like, maybe it does a bit of harm in the start when you associate a word with its English range of meaning as opposed to its Latin range of meaning.
Well, it's hard to generalize when everybody's different. Because one could say that one could say, I, as a teacher, and you probably have the same opinion, that I don't particularly like any kind of teaching or educational philosophy that says, oh, you just have an aptitude for that. Where people say, oh, I'm just bad at math, or you just have to be good at languages or whatever. I'm more like, no, I just think I think almost anyone can learn practically anything, and that most of what is perceived as aptitude is really just subjective experiences in the past, and that can be remedied through a different set of experiences.
Yeah. I've also heard it said that actually when you are interpreting something in your mind, it's going into mentalese anyway. Like you don't necessarily have to think in a language for it to be like there was someone saying, like, do you think in your target language? And then going back and saying, no, I think in mentalese, and it comes out sometimes in English, sometimes in my target language. And I found that an interesting perspective.
Yeah. So I was looking for anything, just catching up. I'm up to 20 minutes ago.
We're getting there.
I went to crypto in ancient Rome. What? Like cryptocurrency? Sunday teacher. That's cute. That's okay. Looking. Okay, here's a great one. Hannah Gross asks, how do you recommend becoming a Latin teacher? Because here in Germany it's becoming less and less popular in schools.
I am not in that position because it's becoming more and more popular in Melbourne, probably for those wrong reasons that I have highlighted. The people wanting to boost their university entrance score. There is a shortage of Latin teachers in Australia. So just become a Latin teacher, emigrate to Melbourne, Australia, and you'll get a job immediately.
That's right.
Every time I've interviewed for a job, it's been immediately offered to me, essentially. That you can't say that about most professions, really, in this day and age. But obviously, don't just become a Latin teacher because you need a job. Become a Latin teacher because you really enjoy the subject and seeing people learn it, and can stand having hormonal teenagers doing behavioral problems in front of you while you sort out their messes.
Indeed. Yeah, well then there you go. Hannah, go to Melbourne. I said it a little bit better this time, sorry. Melbourne.
Melbourne. Or Sydney. Actually, the funny thing is that Sydney is using a whole lot of comprehensible input-based methods, which Melbourne, we're behind the curve. I'm going to be delivering a talk to Melbourne Latin teachers, and I'll put it in at the end. Like, by the way, up in Sydney, they've been doing this for years. Shame them all into action, into using active Latin.
Exactly. Wonderful. Well, I miraculously we've nearly caught up. Wait a minute. Okay. Would you have any ideas on the translation method? Why it's still so ubiquitous in ancient languages, despite all the evidence of it being not particularly effective? Because I think someone else earlier commented, people are reticent to change. I think that's pretty clear. And other than that, I think it's more. I think that's the only reason. It just, the fact that there are thousands of fluent Latin speakers in the world is still unknown to, I think, the majority of people who teach Latin.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
and it's
Latin
like,
teachers are there's a world of Latin teachers of trying to prepare people for exams, and that's sort of like when once they get up to year 12, that's the pinnacle of their Latin experience, versus being aware that there is not only a community of Latin speakers but also autodidact community and all kinds of people who are learning, lifelong learners of Latin, who are reaching high skill levels that are way beyond mine. The ceiling is above me, really. Yeah, so I think that part of the reason, though, that the translation method is quite ubiquitous is because Latin teachers have for years campaigned for Latin to be in schools, because if you don't fight for it to be in schools, it gets removed from the curriculum. And part of the rhetoric that is used, that is recruited to keep classical languages in the classroom, is that they are good for the brain because they're logical deduction puzzles, or that they are different from modern languages and thus can appeal to students for whom the modern language learning techniques don't work, or like just other things like it's different from a modern language and therefore better. And that kind of what makes Latin learning special when I could learn French and go to France and talk in French there. Like we've had to justify it over and over for however many decades, or die. And so trying to make yourself the same as a modern language is to undo all of that rhetoric, and to also, you need to be humble to say that you can learn something from modern language teachers, which I don't think a lot of Latin teachers have been. There's a bit of some relationships between modern language teachers and Latin teachers are not quite healthy. In my school, it's really good. Like we've got good relationships, but in other schools in Victoria, at least, I can say that when Latin is grouped in the modern languages, the modern language head of departments have been trying to force Latin to do something, and the Latin teachers have been pushing back.
Like to not be associated with modern languages.
No, things like maybe the modern language head of department is going to say, oh yeah, everyone's got to have a creative writing piece in their curriculum or something like that. And the Latin
sounds like a great way to learn Latin.
That's not me.
That's how I learned. Like it's constantly writing. Yeah. Writing notes, writing letters, writing. I still keep most of my notes in Latin, and I have for the past 16 years.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's useful. I mean, it's just a way to practice. I don't think there were ever very good notes as far as the good Latin, but it's a way to exercise. It's a good tip. Yeah, there's tip for the day. Write stuff in Latin. Well, let's see. Oh, were you looking at this one by Squid Fan? Ooh, that's interesting. Especially when, most of
it should be taught in school, even if it's with the translation method. There's good versions. I mean, not good, but less bad versions of the translation method, like the Cambridge Latin course, to a lesser extent, the Oxford Latin course, which do have a lot of input material despite being built upon a basis of grammar translation. I think that a lot of students graduate from such courses really liking Latin and enriching our community with their presence.
Well said. Very well said. I've thought about that too with respect to the situation in Italy, where the vast majority is translation-based methods. And Italians usually come out of the experience with a very sour and unfavorable opinion of Latin, think it's especially hard. They also come out with a lot of misconceptions, like one cannot speak Latin because people simply are not capable of spontaneously thinking of cases, or, and yet these people speak spontaneous verb conjugations that, as native English speakers, we don't ever have to worry about. Yet we can learn Italian just fine. All kinds of things like that. So they come out with a lot of, things that are just maybe with a lot of wrong-headed ideas, thanks to teachers who simply didn't know better. But I thought about it like, would it be better? And I think it has to do with, if we want the end result to be people with a fluent reading or even a somewhat basic communicative, maybe not fluent, but the fluent reading ability in Latin. They can read Latin well. They actually really know the language. They've acquired the language. And if I just think of Italy, would I actually want all that, like all that education of Latin to go away, even if it is in a method which I wouldn't want to be done? Because the hope is that I would rather it continue to exist and then slowly transition, hopefully, into comprehensible input methods, rather than just getting rid of it completely. Because then if you want to reinstitute it, that seems way harder.
Yeah. The one situation where I think it would be better to just scrap Latin entirely would be in schools where there's compulsory Latin for, say, the early years, like year 7 and 8. And all they're being taught is chapters from So You Really Want to Learn Latin. And it's just getting them to memorize tables of bambas, but, vamos, batis, but, without any authentic use of the language for 2 years or however many years it is. And then 90% of the students drop it, with only maybe 10 out of that 100 cohort actually going to use those memorized conjugations within schooling. Like, I think that you might as well just start at whatever elective year that you want to choose and do it properly with everyone who is willing, versus force everyone to memorize some tables that they don't even get to use in their real life at all.
Yeah. I suppose for almost anything that's out there, even books that or methods we might not promote ourselves, probably there's an audience that might get some kind of a use out of it. That would be the only thing I would say as a devil's advocate sort of thing, because I'm very pro the methods that I use. But we should always try to expand to, like the same way we're trying to have people expand to comprehensible input and actually, I was hoping, could you give us before we end today? I would love to scire plura de visceribus humanis, to learn more about the internal organs of the body that you have there and that model.
Oh, optime. Illa est Carolina. Carolina est femina. Et pectus apertum est. Meo pectus non est apertum, sed Carolinae pectus est apertum. Et possum videre pulmones. Pulmones. Pulmones extra. Ecce, pulmones. Pulchri sunt. Et in pectore est cor. Cor est mirabile. Et ecce, cor habet ventriculum et atrium est magnifico. Cor est mirabile. Et quoque in corpore sunt alia viscera in ventre. Hoc est viscus maximi momenti est iecur. Iecur est maximum viscus omnium viscerum. Praeter como redicitur skin pellis? Cutis. Iecur non est major cute, sed est maximum viscus internal cute. Et hoc est stomachus aut ventriculus. Cor habet ventriculus, et stomachus quoque est ventriculus, sed Hoc est venter. Ventriculus est diminutivus. Est parvus venter ventriculus aut stomachus. Et ecce. Est intestinum aut intestinus. Est neutrum aut masculinus. Et in intestino sunt lactes et ilia. Est
Nesciebam illud. Lactes et ilia.
Ilia. Ilia sunt grassa. Non sunt tenuia, sed grassa. Et lactes sunt tenues. Sed lactes sunt longae. Ilia sunt brevia. Et quoque sunt sunt arteria et venae. Sunt multa viscera in corpore.
Bye-bye.
Multa viscera.
Optime.
Finis est.
Okay, gratias, Tiviago. That was really interesting. And I learned a couple of things. I didn't know some of those things. And I had not connected that ventriculus was, of course, obviously the diminutive of venter, despite using the term ventricle, knowing that for, a long time. That's cool.
I've squinted at the word ventricle for a long time. Yeah, that's right. Latin is useful too.
That's right.
Little stomach. Yeah. But I'm really happy for this series that I'm making. Oh yeah, I don't know if I mentioned it, which is the human body series. I use more repetition in the actual videos because I kind of just blazed through all the organs in that one. But
and these are just videos for your students, right?
I'm putting them up on the channel for general audience, but also using it for my year 8 students.
I hadn't seen them on your channel, which is why is one of them already up and I missed it?
Oh, the first one, which is just big body parts, no mannequin, is up.
Okay.
And
good.
The next ones are getting edited right now.
When will that next one come out?
In the next few days.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's just the lungs in the next one. Lungs, nose, and mouth, because breathing.
Yeah, pulmonary system. Pulmones system.
Pulmones.
And Carla, thank you so much. Everybody, please subscribe to Found in Antiquity, because she's doing some really interesting things there, things that are going to continue to be useful for, I think, a long time. Like, it's really great. It's nice to make a video that might be interesting in the moment, but making the stuff that you're doing, the songs, the pedagogical materials that can be useful in classrooms or for personal study for years to come. I mean, that's the miracle, I think, of YouTube as an educational tool. So thank you so much for all that you're doing for all of us and for being here today.
Oh, libenter. Thank you so much for inviting me here.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, and maybe we can do it again or some other kind of collaboration in the future. Yes,
I'd love to know if you guys have any ideas for what a collaboration could be for us.
Yeah,
I would be super keen. And
absolutely.
also, check out my channel. I've got a blog as well with extra materials for the video series that I make. I'll probably put up a page about the human body once I've finished teaching it with my year 8s. I'll have made a lot of teaching materials around that. Just check out my blog, check out my Patreon page, check out my channel. It's all great. It's exciting. I'm glad to be changing to more input-based methods.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's a outstanding exemplar for a lot of people who want to follow in your footsteps. Valete omnes, vale Carola.
Vale Luki, valete omnes.